Today we will be discussing how the colonists came together to create the country of the United States. In order to do that, they needed to create a document that drafted out how their government would be ran and how certain laws would be determined. And also, who had the most rights, the states or the federal government, meaning the national government. Today we'll be discussing the Articles of Confederation and the problems associated with the Articles of Confederation. We'll talk about the creation of a new country, the Articles themselves, settling lands, and also problems with the Articles. Unhappy with the governors and officials appointed by the British, the Constitution minimized the power of state governors. So they wanted to create a document that would not put so much power in the hands of one central government. They wanted to have the power in the hands of the people. Legislators elected by the people had more power. So people that were elected by the people, like what we do now in democracy, had the most power. The governor served as the state's executive meaning leader. And the more that people could vote, more people could vote during colonial times. So they had a voting process that they established, and in that process they gave the rights more so to the states than the national government. They also needed a way to protect the rights of the people. In the process of the acts that the British imposed on the colonists, many of their rights were limited and taken away. So states created their own individual Bill of Rights. For example, Virginia had bills of rights that stated that men are naturally free, which should sound similar to the Declaration of Independence, also the freedom of the press, and also a right to free elections. The Articles of Confederation is the first governing body of law, and this was instituted in 1777. So the colonists were already in the process of creating documents to set up their country because they were positive that they would win their independence. So the Articles of Confederation is like the first constitution. Under the Articles of Confederation, the government had one branch of government, and this was known as the legislature. In the Articles of Confederation, they refer to them as Congress. In our current Constitution, we have 3 branches of government, but under the Articles of Confederation, which came first, there was only one. There was no executive branch, like what the president is, and there were no courts or judicial branch. All states were equal and had one single vote. In our country now, we have a different number of representatives from each state, and then we have 2 senators from each state. This would become a compromise later on, but at this point in time, all states had equal say in the law. In order for a law to go into practice, 9 states had to agree, so 9 out of 13 is their majority. In order to prevent too much power going to a central government, Congress gave most of the power to the states. In fact, even Congress had to ask for the states' permission in order to get money. There was no real taxation process in the Articles of Confederation. As part of the treaty, all states had to give up their land west of the Appalachian Mountains in order to approve the Articles. So if you had land outside of that line, you couldn't approve the Articles, and they wanted everybody to approve. Because of this process, the Articles were not approved until 1781, so it took about 4 years for this to happen. And all Western lands were turned over to the national government. This was one power that the national government had. They were in control of all foreign relations, and foreign relations at this time even included land outside of the states, within the current United States. The Land Ordinance of 1785 was a system for land sales and development in which land was divided into townships. So this was the way that you could purchase land outside of the Appalachian Mountains. It sold for $1 an acre at that point in time, which was a significant amount of money. So the Land Ordinance of 1785 basically set up a system so that you could settle land outside of the Appalachian Mountains, but it included a fee. Under each section, townships supported schools and reflected the belief of the nation's leadership relied on education. So here we start to see education as a very important part of the American idea system. We had another land ordinance in 1787 that responded to a request to settle land north of the Ohio River. So this would include Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, that land. Congress guaranteed rights to settlers and banned slavery in this area. So here is another example of Congress being able to control foreign relations, so land outside of the colonies themselves. In order to settle this land, Congress had to appoint a governor, secretary, and 3 judges to the area. They had to have a certain number of people in order to get a state legislature, and they had to have even more people to become a state. So this is how we're going to add states onto the actual country themselves, by having a certain population there, and then the national government would provide a state government that would eventually give you the title of a state. The article set up a way to develop and increase the size of the country. There were some problems. Some of the successes, though, were that it waged a successful war for independence, or the Revolutionary War, and negotiated a peace treaty, known as the Treaty of Paris, and also the setting up rules for settling new lands. The land ordinances of 1785 and 1787 were considered relatively successful. However, the Articles did not give the government enough power to solve problems. So, although they had a legislature, they didn't have an executive power that is supposed to enforce these laws. Some of the problems that the Articles had were economic. Trade was very difficult. Some of the problems that the Articles had were economic. Trade was very difficult because the national government did not have a way to issue taxes or print money. So the states had that power. And because they did not get taxes, there was little money to run the government. So although taxes can be seen as a bad thing, they're necessary in a successful economy and a successful government in order to have money to make things run, to provide schools, to build roads, to keep land processes up, and basically to pay their delegates as well. So without this, your government's going to have problems functioning or working. They also had problems with foreign affairs. The United States seemed to be weak to other nations, and so they didn't get the respect from those nations that they wanted. Also, they had difficulty with other countries that were inside of what is now the United States. The British did not leave the Northwest Territory, which they were said to do in the Treaty of Paris, and also the Spanish did not allow Americans to access the Mississippi River. This river is a huge river that spans almost all the way from the south to the north in the United States and could grant them access to discovering new lands. So without that, they definitely suffered. They also had problems with an economic depression that hit the United States, and it caused farmers to rebel. This is known as Shays' Rebellion. Farmers could not pay taxes because crop prices declined or went down. So the price in which they sold their crops went down, meaning that they didn't get enough income in. If you sell a product like, let's say, shoes, and you say those shoes are going to cost $5 a pair. If your taxes cost $3 for every pair of shoes that are $5, you'll still have $2 left over for your income. However, when that price drops, let's say to $2 a pair, because people can't afford to pay for those shoes, then how are you going to pay the $3 tax? So the farmers ran into this problem where they weren't producing enough money to pay their taxes. They demanded that the government stop farm sales and that the states issue more paper money to pay loans. So this was what they wanted. Daniel Shays led 1,000 Massachusetts farmers in a rebellion. The farmers tried to take weapons or arms from a warehouse, and they were all arrested. Although there wasn't anything truly traumatic from this. It did frighten Americans, and they believed that a stronger central government that could enforce laws and also control the tax system would help prevent rebellions from happening in the future. So this rebellion struck a need for possibly a different structure of government within the United States themselves. So today we've discussed the Articles of Confederation, why they were produced, which is to set up a new government and a new land, and also the strengths and weaknesses that it held. It did set up a good outline of a government and what roles government should play. However, we're going to see a need for those roles to be altered a little bit and have more of the strength go to the central government rather than the state, so that we can prevent problems from happening like depressions and also rebellion.